Meta CEO Mark Zuckerberg has admitted that officials from the Biden administration had pressured his company to remove COVID-19 related content from Facebook and Instagram. In a letter to members of the House Judiciary Committee, Zuckerberg expressed regret for not being more outspoken about government pressures on Meta in 2021. Well, joining us with more on this and other free speech issues is legal scholar and George Washington University law professor Jonathan Turley. Professor Turley's latest book is The Indispensable Right: Free Speech in an Age of Rage. Professor Turley, so was this political pressure against Meta illegal? What do you think?
I believe it is unconstitutional. I talk about Facebook in the book, in the book, The Indispensable Right, because it plays a critical role in what is an unprecedented alliance we have in this anti-free speech movement today of the government, corporations, the media, and academia. But Facebook was the big dog on the block. And for years, Zuckerberg and Facebook and Meta opposed efforts to release files on censorship. So Elon Musk has been attacked unrelentingly after he released the Twitter files that showed this massive censorship system. But Facebook fought it. And what people need to understand is Zuckerberg's admission came only after the House Judiciary Committee forced him to release those documents. So for many of us who are critics, as I was in this book, it's less inspiring as it is insulting to see him saying he's so really, really sorry about censoring people.
Well, Facebook recently blocked the boosting of posts promoting the new Dennis Quaid movie about Ronald Reagan. Facebook said a handful of Reagan movie ads were incorrectly rejected. Then afterwards, clips were again rejected. So one of these ads featured President Reagan saying the country's best days are still ahead. So do you think this would have happened if a clip of Bill Clinton or Barack Obama making a similar remark was posted? What do you think?
I don't. And, what I talk about in the book is that Facebook actually launched a commercial campaign to try to get American citizens to embrace censorship, which they like to call content moderation. And it was a really creepy campaign. It was an effort to appeal to younger people. And that was telling because, as the book talks about, we're creating a generation of speech phobics. These kids have been told their entire lives that free speech is harmful and it's triggering and you don't have to hear opposing views.
How did we get to this point? I'm sure you're discouraged by this.
Well, I am. The book was an effort to try to understand why we're still struggling with free speech in this country. It looks at the personalities and the periods that have shaped our view of free speech. We all seem to agree that free speech is indispensable, but not why. And what I detail in the book is that at the beginning of our republic, we had a moment of clarity. The most revolutionary part of the American Revolution was the First Amendment. No one had ever published a statement like the First Amendment as the foundation of a government, that the government simply could not abridge free speech. That was revolutionary. It's still revolutionary. There's a movement to amend the First Amendment. It's being led by one of my colleagues who says the First Amendment is, quote, aggressively individualistic and that free speech should be balanced against equity. So even today, it's revolutionary. But as the book talks about, we lost that brief moment of clarity. Within a few years, the courts returned to what I call a Blackstonian or British view of free speech, that we protect it to the extent that it's good for democracy. But it's good for democracy. That's not really in debate, but it's more than that. Because what this book argues is that free speech is a natural right. That was how the framers viewed it when they wrote the First Amendment. They believed that free speech was a gift from God, that it belonged to you as a human being. It wasn't granted to you by the government. It's not tolerated by the government. The government has to protect it because it defines you as a human being.
Well, you have a chapter in the book about Holmes and Schenck shouting fire in a crowded theater. So what speech should be limited and who decides what should be censored?
Well, my hair catches on fire every time someone quotes that line. I testified in the House on censorship. And, the Democratic members had changed their position. In my prior testimony, they said there's no proof of any coordination by the government. Then Elon Musk released the Twitter files. And then they said, well, we have to censor. We have to silence these voices. And one of them, Representative Goldberg, quoted that line and said, this is just people screaming fire in a crowded theater. And I said, Representative Goldman, you are familiar, aren't you, that line from Schenck was used to incarcerate a socialist who was opposing the war by passing around a flyer quoting the United States Constitution. Is that the line? Is that the case that you want to use as the standard? Because Holmes himself walked away from that, and the court walked away from Schenck. And the response of Representative Goldman was, we don't need a law lecture here, Professor. And I said, yes, I think you do. Right? I think that the problem with free speech is that every generation has to defend it. And this generation has never been more divided, as you noted, because they have been told that free speech is going to hurt them. You see, it's very hard to get a free people to give up freedom. They have to be really afraid or really angry. And that's what we're seeing. The Washington Post just ran a column saying the First Amendment's out of control and is threatening your very jobs. It's an effort to make you so afraid that you're willing to make yourself less free.
Up next, more with Jonathan Turley, combating disinformation by rating news organizations. Who does the rating? And social media censorship and the upcoming presidential election.